Now, a row has developed over potential penalties that could be imposed on the Scottish Government for using civil service staff to develop policy in reserved areas such as independence. The controversy surfaced in the House of Lords because they're discussing possible revisions to the Cabinet Manual, a Whitehall document codifying the conduct and operation of government and civil servants. Well, we asked to speak to someone from the SNP on this issue. We were told no one was available. Earlier, we spoke to Robert Hazel, a Professor of Government and the Constitution at University College London, who was involved in compiling the original document.
The guidance is very clear on this in the Civil Service Code as well as in the devolution guidance notes. So the Civil Service Code, under the heading Political Impartiality, says to civil servants, and this applies to those in Scotland as well as those in Whitehall, you must serve the government, whatever its political persuasion, to the best of your ability in a way which maintains political impartiality. And it goes on to say, you must act in a way which deserves and retains the confidence of ministers, while at the same time ensuring that you'll be able to establish the same relationship with those whom you may be required to serve in some future government. So for me, it's perfectly proper for civil servants in Scotland to be working on the current Scottish Government's agenda, and that includes their plans for independence.
Well, Labour peer George Foulkes has called for the document to be updated to reflect devolved settlements. He's with us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
You heard there from the man who was involved in drawing up the original document. He thinks it's clear, it doesn't need revision. Is this just mischief-making on your part?
That description of the document was before devolution. Now we've got three levels of government.
No, the document was drawn up before the 2010 election to reflect what might happen in the event of a hung parliament. Devolution was already established at that point.
Now we've got three levels of government in Scotland. We've got councils, local government, Scottish government at Holyrood, and the United Kingdom government. And each has its own responsibilities. Now, if councillors go beyond their responsibilities, they can be surcharged or disqualified. But when we considered the Scotland Acts, we never envisaged that the Scottish Government would try to go into reserved areas like the Constitution. And that's what they're doing now, and it's a mischief-making that they're doing. It also diverts them from their real responsibilities, like education, where they're failing, like the NHS, where we've got waiting lists, and Gary, like the census. What's happened to the census that Angus Robertson's responsible for? I could go through area after area for which they have responsibilities, which they're doing nothing or do very little.
Well, just to be clear,
and they're concentrating on trying to break up Britain.
Well, just to be clear, the raison d'etre of the SNP, of course, has been independence for the whole time that the party has been established, and you describe it as mischief-making. It's front and centre of what they put before voters at every election, and the last time round a majority of voters voted for not just the SNP but parties that proposed independence. So why is it mischief-making for them to pursue that agenda?
No, they can pursue their agenda. They can campaign on independence. It's a political campaign. But they shouldn't use
everything that a political party does is party political.
They shouldn't use taxpayers' money on it. Maybe it's because they haven't got the £600,000 in their accounts that they was reserved, earmarked for an independence campaign, that they're now using taxpayers' money, and that's quite improper for them to do that.
Tommy Shepherd MP has said to us in a statement, this latest intervention from an unelected Lord demonstrates why Labour can't be trusted with Scotland's future. There is an irony here, isn't there, that you sit in an unelected chamber and want to sanction the elected Scottish Government?
Yes, they all go on about the unelected House of Lords, but it is part of our Constitution. And actually, as you know, Gary, I'm campaigning to replace it with a Senate of the nations and regions. But meanwhile, it is part of our Constitution. And, you know, the SNP like us when we overrule the Tory government recently on the illegal immigration bill. They say, oh, we're doing a grand job. Well, they can't have it both ways.
Is this a union of equal partners?
No, it was never meant to be a union of equal partners. That is a myth that has been put around by the SNP. We each have our own responsibilities for which, and I was, as you know, a member of the Scottish Parliament, as well as a member of the House of Commons. And in each of them, I took part in what was their responsibilities at that time. We each have our own responsibilities, but they're different. To call them equal is not the right word. They are different. They have different responsibilities.
So the unelected Chamber of the Lords should have, in your view, more power than the democratically elected Scottish Government?
No, I didn't say that. I said that the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament should have all the powers that they have, and they should exercise them. And they've got a great deal of powers on education, on the health service, on the census, which we have heard nothing about. Whereas Westminster has responsibilities on the Constitution, on foreign affairs, on defence, and we should concentrate on that.
And you have a specific responsibility.
It's absolutely clear to me. There's no difficulties. What the thing is, that the SNP are so preoccupied with breaking up Britain that all other areas for which they are responsible are being neglected in Scotland. You can see that. Walk around the rubbish you can see in Glasgow.
But with respect, Lord Foulkes,
the SNP Council are doing nothing.
You're entitled. You're absolutely entitled. You're absolutely entitled to. You're absolutely entitled to your view on that. But is it the right thing for the reforming chamber, which is there to reform and to look at the legislation put forward by the UK government, to be campaigning on this issue? The point that the Glenrothes MP Peter Grant makes, if you're talking about governments going beyond their competence, he talks about the British government, HS2, Crossrail, Ajax armoured vehicles, passports, driving licences, COVID test and trace, PPE, all of these things which have been heavily over budget. The SNP would argue money misspent there. Is that not what you should be? But is that not what you should be focusing on in the House of Lords, given your responsibility is to look at legislation from the UK government?
Well, you have a look, Gary, at the Hansard over the last year or two, and you'll see that I've been raising it constantly. I reported Michelle Mone to the Commissioner because of what was done in relation to PPE. I've raised issues about the UK government spending too much money on things that they shouldn't be doing, and wasting money on a whole range of things. That's our responsibility as well, and I've been doing that.
It sounds as though you don't trust Scottish Labour to hold the SNP to account.
Yes, they do. They're doing a very good job holding the SNP to account.
Well, why do you need sanctions then in that case?
It's a constitutional matter, and constitution is reserved to the Westminster Parliament. That's why I'm raising it.
But if you're convinced of the merits of the union, which you've campaigned on for a long time, what do you have to fear from the Scottish Government laying out their prospectus?
We have nothing to fear, but they shouldn't be using taxpayers' money. They should be using their own money. Party political campaigns should be funded and financed by the party. As I say, maybe it's because they've lost £600,000 that they need to dip into the taxpayers' pockets to fund their political campaign. But they shouldn't be doing that. It's quite improper. And I've had enormous numbers of emails, of messages supporting my campaign. People around Scotland are up in arms at the SNP neglecting the areas for which they're responsible and spending money on areas which they're not responsible.
Isn't there a danger, given your long time in politics, that actually this might backfire on you in terms of how people might view the way that Westminster is treating the democratically elected Scottish Government?
I don't think so. I think I'm getting a very positive response. People are fed up, and the SNP are slipping dramatically in the polls. They're now down in the latest poll to 2% in the United Kingdom. That's
but you're back to
20%.
Politics rather than the Constitution, Lord Foulkes.
The SNP are failing. They are failing, and I think
that's a political point. That's not about the Constitution.
But they are neglecting their responsibilities.
So this is really about politics at the end of the day, isn't it?
They're neglecting the health service, neglecting a whole range of things, concentrating on trying to break up Britain. And that's not... they can do it as a party. Of course they can. They can argue their case as we argue the case. But we do it with our own money, and they should be doing it with their money, not with taxpayers' money.
Labour Peer Lord George Foulkes, thank you for your time this morning.